Today, the Crimean Peninsula is at the center point of most important ongoing geopolitical issue, the Russo-Ukrainian War and the global tensions that have arisen around it.
Even before the full-scale war began, Russia had already started this process by annexing Crimea in 2014 that shows the higher importance of this region in eye of Putin. In other words, Crimea is more important for Russia in comparison with other regions occupied in Ukraine. Now, the Crimean Peninsula is one of the regions that Russia refuses to relinquish in any peace talks with Ukraine or United States. In simple words, it is non-negotiable for Putin. Although it may be hard to believe, this piece of land, whose conquest has been one of Putin's main motivations for invading Ukraine, was once gifted to Ukraine by the Russians.
In fact, Khrushchev, the former Russian leader of Soviet Union, is the person who wrapped up the peninsula in a red box and gifted it to Ukraine without any struggle or war, at a time when Russians had no difficulties controlling Crimea.
Before continuing this story, I must emphasize this. This video is not attempting to justify or legitimize the Russian invasion. From an international law perspective, it is clear that historical rule over a territory does not justify an act of aggression. The annexation of the Crimean Peninsula violates Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Anyway, let's dive into history and examine the process by which the Crimean Peninsula was gifted to Ukraine.
It is important to note that the first time a Russian government, the Russian Empire, controlled Crimea was in the 18th century. Under the reign of Catherine the Great, the Russian Empire defeated the Ottoman Empire, and as a result, they signed the Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca.
Under the terms of the treaty, the Ottoman Sultan lost control over the Crimean Khanate, marking the first time a Muslim territory slipped from the Sultan's suzerainty. Article 3 of the treaty declared the Tatar peoples free and independent with their religious freedom and the right to be governed by their own laws. While the Ottomans no longer controlled the Crimean Peninsula, it was still not under direct Russian control, although it was within Russia's sphere of influence. The formal annexation of Crimea happened in 1783, marking the beginning of Russian rule over the peninsula, which lasted for more than 2 centuries.
Before moving forward with this story, let me show you this stamp, which officially printed by Russia in 2023 and depicts the historical event that I just described. Putin and Russian propaganda use this historical reference to justify the annexation of Crimea. But what happened next to Crimea's story that led to this situation?
The Crimean Peninsula remained under the sovereignty of the Russian Empire until the October Revolution of 1917, which led to the empire's collapse. During the revolution and the ensuing civil war, Crimea became one of the most contested regions. In reality, control of the peninsula changed hands at least 8 or 9 times. It was ruled alternately by the Bolsheviks and the White Army, each taking control for several months at a time. During this period of time, there were only 2 instances when Crimea was not under the Russian control, neither by the Red Army nor the White Army.
The first time was at the beginning of the October Revolution, when the Crimean Tatars took advantage of the situation and declared an independent government called Crimean People's Republic. It governed the region from December 1917 until January 1918, when it was defeated by the Bolshevik forces.
The second time was between May 1918 and April 1919, when both sides of the Russian Civil War lost control of the region. For the first time, an independent Ukrainian government took control of the Crimean Peninsula.
The Ukrainian state, called the Second Hitanate, was installed by German military authorities as an anti Bolshevik force. Although it was essentially a German puppet state, some historians viewed this period as the first instance in which an independent Ukrainian government held authority over Crimea.
Eventually, under pressure from the German Empire, Ukraine ceded the region to a German-controlled puppet state called the Crimean Regional Government, which was later dismantled by the Russians.
At the end of the Civil War, which resulted in the Bolsheviks' victory, Crimea became an autonomous republic within the Russian SFSR, known as the Crimean Autonomous Socialist Soviet Republic.
The Soviet Union was composed of 15 Union republics, each of which had various subdivisions such as oblasts and autonomous republics. The Russian SFSR and the Ukrainian SSR were two of the most important Union republics within the Soviet Union, but they were distinct political entities.
As I mentioned earlier, after the Civil War, the Crimean Autonomous Republic became part of the Russian SFSR. But what led to its transfer to Ukraine?
In 1954, Khrushchev decided to transfer the Crimean Peninsula to the Ukrainian SSR as an anniversary gift. That year marked the 300th anniversary of the Treaty of Peninsula, which during the Soviet era was portrayed as the treaty that led to the reunification of Ukraine and Russia. A detailed discussion of this treaty and its historical interpretations would take too much time, but in simple terms, it was seen as the starting point of Ukraine and Russia's shared history.
Apart from the debates surrounding the Peninsula Treaty, on February 19, 1954, the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet, by Khrushchev's order, initiated a 4-month legal process that led to Crimea's transfer to Ukraine.
On February 27th, the full text of the decree was published on the front page of Pravda, the official Soviet newspaper, outlining the transfer and its rationale. The decree cited economic integration, territorial proximity, and the strong economic and cultural ties between Crimea and the Ukrainian SSR as the main reasons for the decision. Soviet propaganda presented it as a symbolic gesture of unity between Russian and Ukrainian societies. However, the true motivations behind this transfer remains a subjective debate.
Regardless of the reasons, one thing is certain. The transfer was not due to political pressure or any external force. It was entirely Khrushchev's decision.
As a result, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the legal and political framework of the dissolution process meant that each former Union republic inherited the territories under its administration.
Consequently, Khrushchev's gift resulted in Crimea becoming a part of Ukraine.